The sun burned above the endless desert. Sand stretched in every direction like an ocean of gold. The wind blew dry and hot, whispering secrets only the dead could hear. A man walked slowly, each step sinking into the dunes. His name was Ray. A human traveler, lost and alone, searching for something, anything. His water was nearly gone. His lips cracked and his throat dry. Every step felt heavier, and the heat made his head spin. He was sure he'd die out here, just like the bones he had seen buried halfway in the sand. But then, he saw something strange ahead, something sticking out of the sand. At first, he thought it was another broken machine, or a skeleton, but as he got closer, he saw it was a body, a figure lying face down in the sand, nearly covered by wind-blown dust. Thin arms, strange armor, silver blue skin, not human, definitely alien. Ray dropped to his knees beside her, brushing away sand from her back and face. She was beautiful, even in death. Her skin shimmered faintly under the sun, and strange marks glowed softly on her cheeks. Her eyes were closed, and her lips slightly parted. Ray checked for a pulse, but there was none. No heartbeat, no breath, only silence, still. Something inside Ray told him she wasn't truly gone. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe the heat was playing tricks on his mind. But he refused to walk away. He grabbed his water pouch and poured a few drops on her lips. He shaded her with his body, whispering, "Hey, can you hear me?" There was no answer, but a strange thing happened. Her fingers twitched. Just a little, but enough for Ray to see it. He gasped and leaned in, heart pounding. "Come on, stay with me," he begged. "Don't die out here." He pulled out a small emergency stim from his belt and pressed it against her neck. The needle hissed as it injected warmth and life into her blood. Still no movement, still no breath. Ray sat there, holding her hand, unsure why he felt so connected to a stranger. He spoke softly, telling her stories, anything to keep her from slipping away. Hours passed. The sun began to set. Dark clouds gathered, warning of a desert storm. Ray looked up. He had to find shelter. He couldn't carry her far, but he saw a rocky outcrop nearby. With great effort, he lifted her onto his back and stumbled toward it. The rocks offered little cover, but enough to hide from the wind. He wrapped both of them in his survival blanket and lit a tiny heater. The sandstorm roared outside, shaking the rocks. Inside, Ray kept watching her face, praying she would open her eyes. He was so tired, so cold now, even in the heat of the storm. Then it happened. A soft breath escaped her lips. Her chest moved slightly, then again. Ray sat up straight, shocked and hopeful. Her fingers moved. Her eyes fluttered open. But what he saw in those eyes made his blood freeze. They were not like human eyes. They glowed faintly, silver and blue, swirling like galaxies, and they didn't look confused. They looked ancient, awake, and dangerous. She stared at Ray for a long moment, not moving, not speaking. Then slowly, she whispered a single word in a language he didn't understand. It sent a chill down his spine. Her voice was soft, broken, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. Ray leaned closer. What did you say?" The alien girl blinked slowly, her lips trembling. She looked around, confused by the cave, the heater, and him. Then her eyes locked onto his again, and she whispered something else. It sounded like a name or a warning, but Ray didn't understand. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled. The storm outside grew louder. But this was different, like something moving under the sand. The girl's eyes widened in fear. Her hand gripped Ray's arm tightly. She spoke again, this time louder, more urgent. Still, he didn't know what it meant. But fear filled her voice. "Hey, it's okay," Ray said, trying to calm her. But she shook her head, pointing at the sand outside. Something was out there, something she had escaped from. Ray didn't know it yet. But saving her had started something ancient, something buried, and now it was waking up. The girl stared at the flickering heater light like she had never seen fire before. Her body was weak, shivering despite the warmth. Ray gave her the last of his water, and she drank slowly, as if each drop held a memory. She still hadn't said anything he could understand, but her eyes spoke enough. They were filled with fear, confusion, and something deeper. She didn't act like someone who had just come back to life. She acted like someone who had escaped death, but left something behind. Outside, the wind was dying down, and the sandstorm moved away into the distance. The silence that followed was too quiet, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Ray watched her carefully, wondering who or what he had just saved. She touched her own chest, where he had injected the stim. Then she looked at him and pointed to his heart. Ray nodded, guessing what she meant. "Yeah, I helped you," he said softly. But she shook her head, as if trying to correct him. She placed her hand on the sand and traced a spiral shape, slow and careful. Ray didn't understand what it meant, but the girl looked more serious now. She pointed to the sand again, then to herself, then closed her eyes and laid flat. It was like she was showing him what happened, buried, silent, lifeless, until he came. But there was more in her gesture than just that. She whispered something that sounded like Kara. Ray tilted his head, repeating the word, and she nodded weakly. Was that her name, or a place, or a warning? She tried to stand, but her legs trembled and gave out. Ray caught her gently and helped her sit back down. The sun began to rise, painting the dunes in soft orange light. They had made it through the storm, but something still felt wrong. Girl turned her face toward the sun and closed her eyes. For a few seconds, she looked at peace. Then her eyes snapped open, and she grabbed Ray's wrist tightly. Her grip was stronger than he expected. She pointed east, toward the deepest part of the desert. Her lips moved fast now, words pouring out in her strange language. She seemed desperate, like time was running out. Ray could only nod, hoping she would calm down. He picked up the few supplies he had left and motioned for her to follow. Surprisingly, she stood this time. Slowly but steady, they moved together, step by step, toward whatever secret lay buried in the sand. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher, and heat returned to the land. Ray could see something strange ahead, dark shapes rising from the dunes. At first, he thought it was a mirage, but the girl's pace quickened. Her eyes locked on the place like she was seeing home or a grave. There were broken towers, half-buried stone, and symbols carved into metal. An ancient ruin, hidden beneath centuries of sand and silence. Ray could feel the weight of it even before they stepped inside. The girl walked ahead, as if drawn by invisible threads. She touched the walls, her fingers sliding into cracks where glowing lines flickered faintly. The place was dead, but not empty. Ray stepped in behind her, and the air turned colder. It was the first time in days he felt cold, and it made his skin crawl. The girl knelt in front of a broken doorway and began to hum softly. Her voice echoed strangely, bouncing off the stone and fading into nothing. Then the symbols on the wall began to glow. One by one, Ray took a step back in shock as the floor shifted beneath him. Something deep below had heard her song. A hidden panel opened in the ground, revealing a narrow stairway leading downward. The girl turned to Ray and looked into his eyes, her face full of fear and hope. She pointed down and whispered one word. He finally understood. Home. But just as they were about to enter, Ray froze. He heard something behind them, a sharp clicking noise in the sand. He turned around slowly and saw shapes moving along the dunes. Machines, tall and sharp, scanning the area. Hunters, not natural, not friendly. The girl grabbed Ray's hand and pulled him down the stairs without another word. They vanished into the dark below, just as the machines reached the surface. And as the door slid shut above them, sealing them in shadow, Ray whispered, "What did I just walk into?" The stairs were narrow and steep, and the air grew colder with every step. Ray held a small light in one hand. The alien girl clung to the wall, her breathing slow but steady. They didn't speak, not because they didn't want to, but because the silence felt sacred here. Each footstep echoed like thunder, as if they were walking through something ancient and watching. The deeper they went, The more the walls changed, metal became stone, and stone became bone. Strange carvings lined the walls, spirals, stars, and creatures Ray had never seen. Girl touched one of the carvings gently, and it lit up under her fingers. Ray saw it as a tall beast with long arms and glowing eyes, standing beside machines that looked like gods. She didn't explain it, but her eyes told him everything. She had seen this before. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a round chamber filled with dust and darkness. In the center of the room stood a broken machine, covered in sand, wires hanging like roots from a dead tree. The girl walked toward it slowly, like it was calling her. She knelt before it and placed both hands on a panel near its base. The machine made a soft sound, a heartbeat made of metal. Ray stayed back, unsure if he should interfere. The girl's eyes closed, and her body began to shake. Not in fear, but in memory. She was remembering something painful, something buried. Suddenly, she gasped and fell to the ground. Ray rushed to her, catching her before she hit the floor. She opened her eyes, and tears rolled down her cheeks. She pointed to a part of the machine, a sealed box tucked into the side. Ray didn't know why, but he felt a chill as he reached for it. The metal was smooth and cold. Humming faintly, he pressed on the latch, and the box opened with a soft click. Inside was a glowing core, faint and pale blue. The moment it opened, the girl's breath caught, and she whispered, "That's my heart." Ray blinked, thinking he heard her wrong, but she pointed to herself, then to the core, and said again, "My heart." Ray didn't understand how that was possible. Was it a machine part? Was she even alive in the way he thought? He tried to ask her, but she shook her head, as if words would not be enough. Instead, she reached toward the core with trembling fingers. The moment she touched it, her body glowed softly, like moonlight. Through water, a hidden door opened behind the machine, revealing another room beyond. This one was different, cleaner, colder, full of cables and frozen glass. Ray followed her inside and stopped in shock. There were tubes along the wall, and inside each one was a girl just like her. Some were broken, others still filled with mist. She walked to one of the tubes and placed her hand on the glass. A reflection of herself looked back, but it wasn't her. It was someone older, scarred, and lifeless. Ray whispered, What are they?" She turned to him slowly and said, "They were me, but I lived." Her voice was calm, but her eyes trembled. Ray didn't know what kind of place this was, a lab, a tomb, a vault of forgotten souls. He looked around and noticed something else, symbols glowing above each tube. One of them was cracked open, wires torn out and blood dried, but clearly real, spilled across the floor. The girl walked past it and pointed to her own chest. She had been in one of these tubes. She had died in one, and then somehow awakened beneath the sands. Ray began to realize something terrible. Someone had made copies of her, maybe dozens, maybe more, and then buried them beneath the desert, waiting to be found or forgotten. But why? Suddenly, the machine behind them roared to life, lights flashing red. The floor vibrated, and a voice echoed through the chamber in a language Ray didn't understand. The girl's expression changed from sorrow to panic. She grabbed Ray's arm and pulled him toward the exit. Whatever was waking up, it wasn't friendly. Before they could leave, a light shot down from the ceiling, scanning both of them. The machine spoke again, louder now. Ray heard one word repeated several times, "Stolen." He turned to the girl. "What did we steal?" She looked at the heart in her hand and whispered, "Me." Behind them, the wall split open, and a tall shadow stepped out. Metal and bone fused together. It looked straight at the girl, eyes burning white. She stepped forward and spoke one word in her language, her voice steady, her back straight. The figure paused for a moment, then raised a blade from its arm. Ray stepped in front of her without thinking, fists clenched, eyes wide. He didn't know what this thing was, or why it wanted her gone, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her die again. The blade stopped an inch from Ray's face. Time froze in that moment, silence heavy between life and death. Ray didn't flinch, not because he was brave, but because he had no idea what else to do. He had never faced anything like this, not a machine, not a ghost, not whatever this thing was. It stood still, as if confused by Ray's presence. Scanning him from head to toe, behind Ray, the alien girl whispered something, one word only. The blade slowly lowered, not out of kindness, but out of recognition. The figure turned away and stepped back into the shadows, vanishing into the wall. Like mist, Ray turned to the girl, confused, his heart pounding like drums in a war zone. She didn't speak, only placed a hand on his chest and nodded slowly. The tension didn't leave the air. It stayed thick, like the place itself was alive. Listening. They moved forward through the underground passage, following dim lights that lit up with their steps. Ray couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't walking alone. Whispers crawled along the walls, too soft to understand, but heavy enough to feel. The tunnel opened into a giant cavern that looked untouched by time. Above them was a ceiling made of crystal, glowing softly with trapped starlight. Below it, a stone floor shaped like a spiral galaxy, leading to a central platform. In the center stood a monument half-machine, half-tomb, surrounded by symbols that flickered like fire. The girl stepped onto the platform, her body shaking, like she had waited lifetimes for this moment. Ray stayed back, unsure if he belonged there. She knelt before the monument and touched the base, whispering a name. The ground trembled, not with danger, but with memory. The lights around them shifted color from cold blue to soft gold, like sunrise. Images began to form in the air above them, moving like smoke and light. Ray watched, amazed as he saw scenes from another time. The girl, younger, running through a city of silver towers and blue skies. Her people were strong, proud, advanced, but frightened. A dark shape had appeared in the sky. And soon after, everything changed. Buildings fell, machines broke, and something ancient was awakened beneath their world. The girl had been chosen, not as a warrior, but as a key. She carried something inside her, something not meant for this world, so they built the vault, made copies of her, and buried them. One would survive, just one to carry the memory forward. Ray now understood why she didn't remember her name. She wasn't just one person. She was a fragment of many, holding the last story of a forgotten people. When the vision ended, she turned to Ray with tears in her eyes. He stepped forward, unsure what to say, but knowing words might not matter. She took his hand and placed it on the monument, and it responded to his touch. The floor opened slowly, revealing a spiral staircase leading downward once again. But this time, it wasn't dark, it glowed with golden light. Ray looked at the girl, and for the first time she smiled, just a little. They descended together, their steps echoing like quiet thunder. At the bottom was a narrow corridor lined with crystal mirrors. Ray looked into them and saw not his reflection, but his past memories, fears, joys, and regrets. The girl passed through without flinching, as if she had seen this before. At the end of the hall stood a chamber with a single stone seat and a floating object above it. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat waiting to return. The girl walked forward, then stopped. Turning to Ray slowly, she touched the object, and it responded with a soft hum. Her body glowed again, and Ray could feel heat around them rising. Then the girl collapsed, her body falling silently onto the floor. Ray ran to her, shaking her shoulders, calling out. Her eyes were open, but empty. He turned to the object, confused and desperate. It hovered in place, no longer pulsing. Ray stepped toward it, reached out, and the moment his fingers touched it, he felt it, a rush of energy, pain, light, and memories not his own filled his mind. He saw stars dying, worlds burning, and always her standing alone. Then it stopped, and he was back in the chamber, holding the glowing object in his hands. He turned to her, and her body twitched slightly. Then her eyes slowly blinked, and color returned to her face. She gasped for air, clutching her chest. Ray dropped to his knees, shaking, unable to speak. She looked at him, truly looked, and whispered, "You touched it." "But you lived." Ray had no answer, only questions. But she smiled again, wider this time, and somewhere, deep within the vault, something began to unlock. The door behind them opened without sound, not with gears or grinding metal, but like air splitting quietly. Ray turned, blinking against the golden light spilling in. The alien girl stood beside him, breathing slower now, more steady, but her eyes were wide, filled with a fear he hadn't seen before. They stepped into the new chamber, and everything changed. It was not just a room. It was a world beneath the world. Stone paths stretched across a bottomless void, glowing with symbols. Older than any language Ray knew, above them floated a cracked ceiling shaped like a sky. Where stars had been carved by hand, the air was heavy, not with heat, but with voices that didn't speak, only watched. The girl took a step forward, and the stone path lit beneath her feet. She whispered something Ray couldn't catch, a word or maybe a name. A wind began to stir, though there were no windows, no air, no sky. Ray followed her, careful not to step off the path. The feeling was strange, like walking through someone's dream or memory. On both sides, statues stood tall and silent, carved in alien shapes. Some looked like her, some looked like nothing Ray had ever imagined. Each one had eyes made of crystal, and some of them were cracked. One statue had its arms raised toward the ceiling, like it was begging the stars. Another had its mouth open wide, forever frozen in a silent scream. Ray didn't ask questions now. He knew answers would come when they wanted to, but his heart beat faster when he saw bones scattered along the path. Old, dry, bleached white by time, but clearly not forgotten. The girl stepped carefully over them, not afraid, just respectful. She knew what this place was. When they reached the center, they found it a door made of dark glass. Floating in the air, waiting, breathing, the girl pressed her hand to it, and it didn't open right away. Instead, a voice filled the chamber, deep and broken, speaking her name. Not the name Ray had heard before, but another older one. She froze, her hand shaking against the glass. Ray could feel something pressing on his mind, like a weight too heavy to hold. He stepped beside her, placed his hand on hers, and the pressure eased. The door opened slowly, revealing a staircase leading down once more. But now, the warmth of the golden light faded behind them. They descended into shadows where even sound didn't follow. Ray's flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but then they entered a wide, circular room where the air returned hot, thick, full of dust and iron. In the center stood a massive, circular pit, and above it, a throne made of bones and wires. Sitting on the throne was a shape neither human nor alien, wrapped in cloth. Unmoving, Ray stopped in his tracks, every hair on his body standing up. The girl stepped forward and bowed low, her voice soft and shaking. She said something that echoed across the walls. The shape on the throne moved a slow lift of the head. Glowing red lights lit behind the cloth where its eyes should have been. It spoke in the same ancient language, low and sharp like knives dragged across stone. Ray didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was angry, and it remembered her. The girl raised her hand, holding the glowing object from before. The figure hissed, its cloth robes flaring as energy filled the room. Ray stepped in front of her, again without thinking, again without plan. The creature paused, head tilted, curious about him, then it laughed a dry, static-filled sound that made the walls tremble. It said one word in his language, blood, then pointed at Ray and smiled. Ray took a step back, suddenly dizzy. The girl grabbed his arm and whispered something in his ear, her voice shaky, but her words clear. "It smells you. It needs you to wake the lock." Ray didn't understand, but she held his hand tight and led him to a stone altar. A small spike rose from the surface, shining with soft red light. He hesitated, but she nodded, placing her own hand over his heart. Ray took a breath, closed his eyes, and pressed his palm to the spike. It cut into his skin, just a little, just enough. The moment his blood touched the stone, the room shook. The creature on the throne screamed, not in pain, but joy. The girl fell to her knees, clutching her chest, eyes glowing fiercely. The throne cracked, the pit began to open, and the light from below was blinding. Ray pulled her back as the floor gave way, revealing a second city below burning red, full of movement. She whispered, "It's not dead. It was never dead. It was sealed, and now, because of him, it was waking up again." Asterisk it started with a scream, not hers. Not his, but the city itself. A deep, endless howl rose from beneath the shattered stone, as if something buried had just opened its eyes. Ray staggered back, dragging the alien girl with him, her body limp, her breathing fast and shallow. The throne of bones crumbled, falling into the pit like dust in a storm, and from that pit came rising a shape too big to be real, too alive to be forgotten. Massive wings unfolded, black and scarred, brushing against the walls as it rose. Its body was made of metal and flesh, fused by ancient power. Its face was covered by a mask, smooth and eyeless, but full of hunger. The girl tried to speak, but only a weak whisper escaped her lips. Ray held her close, whispering, "Stay with me, please," even as he stared at the nightmare above. The creature didn't speak. It simply breathed, and the room shook with each breath. Symbols along the walls lit up red, then burst into sparks. Ray felt something inside his chest change, something warm and strange, like a thread pulling tight between his heart and hers. He looked down at the girl in his arms, her skin glowing faintly again, but flickering like a fading light. She opened her eyes, pain clear in them, and reached for his hand. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "It feeds on memory, on soul." I was the lock. Ray didn't know what that meant, but he understood one thing. She had been sacrificed long ago to keep this thing buried. And now he had broken that seal. The creature spread its wings fully, its body rising higher until it touched the top of the chamber. Then it stopped, turning toward Ray and the girl. It tilted its head, sniffing the air like a predator tasting fear. And it stepped forward, not fast, but slow, sure, certain, like it knew there was nothing that could stop it. Ray searched the room, looking for anything, any weapon, any exit, but the altar was gone, and the stair behind them had collapsed. Only one thing remained, a strange circle of light in the far corner. It shimmered like water, whispering promises of escape or death. Ray lifted the girl into his arms and ran, not thinking, only moving. Behind him, the creature let out a low hum, and Ray's legs almost gave out, his vision blurred, and his thoughts scattered. Like his memories were being stolen piece by piece, he stumbled into the light, falling through it, the world spinning, and landed hard on smooth stone. Gasping for air, the girl coughed, alive, still glowing faintly, but growing dimmer every second. They were no longer in the chamber, no longer in the city. They stood inside a round room filled with floating orbs of light. Each orb pulsed with a slow rhythm, soft and calm. Ray looked up and saw something that stopped his breath. A single large orb in the center, pulsing faster than the others, red and hot. The girl reached toward it, her fingers trembling. "That's my core," she whispered. "They pulled it from me to power the seal." Ray looked at her, barely holding herself together. He didn't know how to help, but he knew he had to. He stepped forward and touched the orb. Instantly, pain shot through his arm and into his chest. Flashes of her life running, crying, trapped, waking in darkness burned through his mind. He saw everything she had lost, every version of her that had died. His knees buckled, but he didn't let go. The orb cracked and light spilled out like fire. The girl screamed, her voice echoing across the chamber. But then her body straightened, her eyes glowing stronger, her light no longer flickering. Ray collapsed beside her, exhausted, barely conscious. She looked down at him, tears falling from her glowing eyes. "You gave me your heart," she said quietly. Again, the city above began to crumble, the creature roaring with fury, but it no longer hunted, it feared. For the girl who had once been the key was now something more, not a memory, not a copy, not a sacrifice, but a soul reborn. Tied to a human heart, she stood tall, her feet hovering slightly above the floor. Light poured from her chest and into the cracks of the chamber walls. The orbs around them spun faster, and the floor shook. From the sky above, a beam of gold tore through the stone, reaching for her, and she rose toward it, carrying Ray in her arms like he once carried her. The creature screamed one last time, but its voice was swallowed by the light. And then, the city collapsed, buried again beneath silence and time. He woke to the sound of wind, but it was soft this time, not the burning desert wind that cut skin and blinded eyes. It was cooler, slower, almost like the earth itself was breathing. Ray opened his eyes to a sky he didn't know, purple and gold, with stars that moved slowly across the light. He was lying on smooth stone, not sand, not broken ruins, and the air no longer smelled of dust or death. Above him, the alien girl floated gently, her body surrounded by soft white light. She no longer looked broken or lost. Her hair flowed like liquid shadow, and her markings glowed like calm fire. She looked down at him, smiling, not with sadness, but with peace. "You're awake," she said, and her voice didn't tremble this time. Ray sat up slowly, his body still sore but whole. The pain from before was gone, replaced by something quiet and warm inside his chest. He touched the spot where the blood had dripped on the altar and felt something new. A pulse, not his alone, but shared. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his heart. "We're joined now," she whispered. "Your strength kept me alive." Ray didn't understand everything, but he nodded. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he had become part of something bigger than himself. He looked around and saw they were no longer underground. They stood on a mountain peak above, a sea of dunes that glowed like glass under the strange sky. The desert was silent, but no longer empty. Where once there had been ruins and buried cities, now golden lights pulsed faintly beneath the sands. The creature that had risen was gone, sealed again by her will, but not in darkness this time. It was locked in light, under the guardianship of two souls joined by sacrifice. She told him stories then, slowly, gently, as the sun began to rise in this strange sky, of her people, once proud and afraid, of how they tried to control what they didn't understand, of how they made copies of her to trick fate, to fight time, and of how none survived until him. "We're not chosen by them," she said. "You chose me." Ray looked at her and smiled, tired but happy. "I didn't know why I stopped that day," he whispered. "I just couldn't leave you in the sand." She reached for his hand and held it. Her skin no longer cold. It felt like sunlight, real, alive, whole. Time passed differently here, and the sky never turned dark. The place they stood became a silent monument, unseen by the world, and yet, every so often, a gust of wind would carry a whisper through the desert, a story told by stars and sand, of a human who gave his heart to a forgotten soul. Some say the dunes still shift when no one watches, that strange lights rise from beneath the earth. The city below still dreams, but now without fear, because it remembers the man who gave everything to save someone already lost. And the girl, once buried beneath the sands, who came back to life holding his name close. They never left, not really, not the desert, not each other. They walked together into places no map could find, where silence is soft, where death is not. The end, and where a single choice, made beneath burning skies, could light up the stars forever.